Hi, this is John. I'm here with my great aunt Betty, Gabriella, who I visited a month or two ago, and we talked a little bit about her life and upbringing and memories, and I wanted to get some of that on audio and or video just for prosperity, because I wasn't able to do that with Belva, my grandmother, or Anthony, and so finally it looks like I might finally get to do that. So say hi, Betty. And we'd already done a test, and I already had screwed something up. You weren't born in Dodge City, you were born in Jetmore, Kansas, you said.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's about 30 miles, you said, which direction from Dodge City?
Northeast.
Okay. And
That's where my father was born, my oldest brother, and my great grandfather, who was a second lieutenant in the cavalry in the Civil War. He was a Confederate, and he went up there and after the war and homesteaded. He had 8 children, and he took up 8 homesteads in Jetmore.
oh, wow. And is that where you were telling me that you were the only farmhouse with a phone for?
No, that was after I moved to Enterprise, Kansas.
Oh, okay. So
With a great aunt and uncle.
I might have skipped ahead a little bit. So you were in Jetmore until you were how old?
8 years old.
Okay. And then it was to Dodge City or to Enterprise?
Well, I went back and forth because my mother was ill. When I was born, they found out she had tuberculosis. And so my aunt, 2 different aunts, would come and stay with us kids. I had an older brother. Then later, I had another brother and a sister, and but we never ever lived together as a family because my mother was sick all our lives. So we just lived with both of our grandparents or friends. So real good friends took my sister in and raised her all her life. And then when my younger brother was 11 years old, they took him and raised him on. Then they adopted him later. And my oldest brother died of spinal meningitis when he was 12 years old, and I was 10. And then when I was 8 years old, my grandmother was she was ill. She had a lot of heart trouble and a goiter and thyroid problems, and she couldn't take care of me. So she was going to put me in an orphan's home, and I was so happy she'd take me in. They lived in Dodge City then, and she would take me up and walk me up there, and I'd see all the little kids playing, and I thought, oh, that's really going to be fun when I see I could play with a lot of kids, because where they lived, there were just 2 boys and my brother, and they didn't like a little girl tagging along with them, so I didn't get to play with anybody. And then my was my grandma's brother, who lived in Enterprise, Kansas, and he came and visited my grandma, and I still had 2 weeks of at school, and he said, no, she's not going to an orphan's home. I'm going to take her home with me. So they took me home with them, and I lived there till I got married. I was 23. But they went there they had 2 daughters, and he had grandchildren about my age. And so the Enterprise Academy was there, and that's why he moved there, to put his daughters in the school. And then I graduated from Enterprise Academy. Then I went to Union College, which was in Lincoln, Nebraska, and one of his daughters was a nurse, so I had to be a nurse. That's all I knew. And I took all my nurses training, and you could, at that time, they had an RN BS degree at the same time. So I took my 41 hours pre-nursing. Then I came to Boulder and started in nurses training. Did you want me to say history? And Anthony had been overseas. He was in the war, in World War II, and went from Normandy to the Battle of the Bulge, and he was over there 3 years, lived in foxholes and things, and so he had a 90-day furlough because they didn't get their furloughs of 30 days every year, so he was there in 90 days, and I met him there, and I went out with him 3 or 4 times. He had not a brand new, but he bought a 40 Chevy convertible, and so I got to ride in that, and he went back to Fort Dix, or no, he went to Maryland, Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and to take bomb disposal training, and then he started writing to me, and I didn't know if I'd ever hear from him or anything after he left. I figured that was it. He wrote to me for 2 years, and then we got married, and they sent him to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, for a bomb in the bomb disposal area. It was artillery center.
Well, 90 days was enough. 90-day furlough. So you met when you were in training at the Boulder Hospital?
Yes.
At the hospital?
Yes, on 4th and Mapleton, the old hospital. They called it Boulder Hospital, Sanitarium and Hospital.
Was he there for an appointment, or did he just happen to bump into you? Or?
No, I knew I'd gone to the college in Lincoln, and I met some of the kids that were from Boulder. So
some of the Gabriellas? Or?
They weren't Gabriellas, they were just friends.
Oh, okay.
And so I met them out here, and they knew Anthony, and they introduced us.
Oh. You said your grandfather was what rank in the Confederate Army?
2nd lieutenant.
Okay, and how did he meet your grandmother?
Oh, I have some history on that. I think it's really, really something. Then they went to, they rode their horses. Each rode a horse into the church, got married, and rode their horses off. I wish I'm going to have to read that over again. They're really interesting.
Yeah, this is like 1860s or?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. He was, the Civil War was 1861 to 1865.
Yes, I think so.
And then my grandfather was born in 1866.
Okay.
And but they had some other children, and he lived in Missouri, and so he fought for Missouri, and he went back to their home, and everything was torn up there. So I'd like to know what happened to my grandmother, where she went when all that was happening.
Yeah.
Because they took her out of her home, but I don't know. And she had about 2 children.
I remember Anthony took quite an interest to some of those Civil War memorials back there on some of your travels in the Midwest and around like Kentucky and Tennessee. I didn't realize that you had such a close tie. I didn't know your grandfather was a 2nd lieutenant.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a real horseman. Mm-hmm. He always had horses, a lot of them.
Well, it was probably a status symbol having a wedding on horseback back then.
Yeah.
So the farmhouse was an enterprise where you were telling me that you had the only phone or for any of the parcels around you. I guess you
Right.
guys are probably on quarter sections or full sections or.
Yeah, I think we had a quarter section.
So that's 160 acres.
Uh,
And then, so if you had to relay a message, the phone company recruited you and you'd get a dime
yes.
and they'd let you go in and the switchboard was in Enterprise? Or,
Yes, uh-huh.
and they'd let you connect the call with the plugs and.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fun.
How old were you then?
About 10 maybe.
Well, that sounds fun. And then high school was in Dodge City, or?
No, I went from the second grade on up through the 12th grade in Enterprise.
Okay.
I went to the church school and to the academy, and they had classes from 7:30 to 12:30, and then the kids all worked in the afternoons. And a lot of them pretty well worked their way through school because they had dormitories.
And so, in your career choice was basically become a nurse after that. So,
Yeah.
how did do you know how your relatives ended up in Ohio City in the Gunnison area? Like,
Yes, my Aunt Maud, who was the second sister down from my mother, became a school teacher, and she went to the college in Gunnison to learn to teach school, and that was her first experience of teaching school.
I was at
And
Western
and
State College, the one in Gunnison.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, Gunnison State College.
Well, maybe they called it something different then, but yeah, I think it is.
Probably.
Yeah, that's probably the one.
And then there was another sister, my Aunt Anna, and when she got to the age to go to high school, Grandpa said, if you want to go to high school, there's a horse out in the barn, but this high school was 10 miles away. So my Aunt Maud was going to college in Gunnison, so she said, you come up here and live with me. And people then used to have young girls come and stay in their homes and work for room and board. And so she went up there and found a place and went to high school. And they had the narrow gauge railroad that went from Gunnison and up to, what's the name?
Ohio City or Pitkin?
Pitkin, and yeah, on up to the tunnel, through the tunnel. And so she would, on Friday afternoon, she'd catch the train and ride up to Ohio City and stay the weekend sometimes with my Aunt Maud up there. And
yeah, I remember when you told me that last visit, I thought, well, that's pretty luxurious for the times to be able to ride a train over there versus a horse or a stagecoach or something.
yeah.
And Anna's the one that did she marry into the family, and that's how she ended up running that resort up there, the
Yes.
Three Rivers?
Yes. She came to Dodge City when I was in kindergarten. I was 5 years old, and stayed with my brother Rex and I. And then she took us on the train out to my grandpa and grandma Dickie's in Waltz, Colorado. And she went on to Gunnison and and then eventually to Almont, where there was a resort. And she worked in the resort, cleaning cabins and things in the summer. And she wound up marrying the boss's son.
Oh.
And they eloped and went to, I forgot where she told me they went. Anyway, they came back and they were married. So the folks accepted her, and she worked there for a long time.
Yeah.
And cleaned cabins, and her mother-in-law around the post office. They had a big store there, and so she taught her how to sort the mail and everything. And eventually, she got the post office job, and she worked as a postal worker for 43 years there. And then they built new post office and stuff. She,
Anna was at the post office for 43 years?
uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's nothing to take for granted getting accepted into the family, especially back then. What did you say it was? Waltz, Colorado?
Walsh, near
Oh, Walsh?
Springfield.
Oh, Walsh, okay.
It's near Springfield.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of that. I thought you said Waltz, sorry. Dad talks about a camping trip where, well, he talks about the one in Yellowstone where I guess he was sitting on a picnic bench next to Grandpa, who was not moving so fast, and there was a bear, and he was going to turn around and tell Grandpa, "Hey, there's a bear," and Grandpa was halfway to the tent or the cabin, and no small feat getting out of a picnic table with a bench where you gotta, it's a fixed chair, you gotta get your leg out there. And who was it that was chasing the bear or trying to hit him on the head with the frying pan? Was that Carmela or Verlene? Or?
Oh, that Anthony and I saw that. That maybe they saw something too. But we saw, we were just parked along the road and watching the bears. We saw a mama bear with 2 or 3 little cubs come walking down the road, and she made a little noise, and the little bears went up the tree, and she walked over, and there was some people having their breakfast at a camp at table, and the bear just sat right down at the table and took over and eating the pancakes or what, and the woman came out with a frying pan and started beating the bear on the head. The bear didn't pay any attention to her, just went ahead and ate. They finally had to leave because they couldn't get the bear to leave.
Oh, so the frying pan wielder wasn't one of our relatives? I'm surprised to hear that, but I'm glad we got the story straight.
Yeah. That's
so that was probably in the 50s, mid to late 50s?
We lived up in Cody in 60 and 61.
Oh, did you? Was that for a job that Anthony had?
Yeah, X-ray.
Oh, okay. I guess I did. I guess I did know that. What year were you married again?
1948.
Okay. And his first gig in radiology was in Kansas, or did he go to school in Kansas for radiology?
No, he went to school in Cody, Wyoming.
Oh, okay.
That's why we were up there.
So 2 years in Cody, and then where'd you go from there?
We came back to Boulder.
And then did you live in that bottom floor apartment where Anthony fed the train whistle up the heating duct in retaliation to the neighbors making noise? Which
Yeah.
I always wondered what they must have thought, and how could they thought that was a retaliation? They would have just been more confusing than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you lived there and for quite a while until you finally talked him into taking some of the money out of the bank to buy this place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that was when?
We built this house in 72.
Okay. Yeah, the year I was born.
Oh, I was wondering, because you came up when you were a baby, and we had a shag carpet, and you'd they'd set you on the floor, and you'd pull the shag.
Yeah.
You like to play with that?
Yeah, I think Grandma's house, she moved to Evergreen in 74, and she had shag too. I think she even had a rake. I kind of like doing that. I think I mentioned last time that I noticed I went to Lucy's, Lucy and Louie's, the first time in my adult life last summer with Dad and cousins, and I noticed she had the same, it looked like an oil painting, but it was probably a print of aspen trees, kind of a forest landscape. And I was looking at it, and I was like, I think Grandma had that same photo with the same kind of gold leaf kind of a frame Evergreen, and they must have gone to some art sale at the Merchandise Mart or something in the 70s. Or maybe it was at Weberg's when Grandma got all her furniture for her place or something. I don't know. But now it's like they must have bought. It was either a coincidence or they were together when they bought the same artwork or something.
Huh.
But you went out to when my mom and dad were living in California. I guess it was Riverside. Was that 1970 that you went out there and went to Disneyland, or?
Oh boy. I don't know if you came back here and said, probably so. I can't remember the year.
I think it was they were out there. They were, back here by the time I was born in 72. So I think that was the trip where you were in the back of the Dad's 66 Shelby with the quarter windows, and you went through the exhibit, and the lions were looking at you through those little windows.
Yeah. The lion had gotten out, and the attendant was trying to get him back in, and he was in a Jeep, and that was painted striped like a zebra, and he'd go around the front, and the lion would go to the back. And then he'd be on the other side, and the lion looked through the car and looked right into, because he was the same level as we are.
Yeah.
Were
kind of exposed back there. There's a big glass window above your heads, and then those windows on the side that only the 66 Shelby's had. Yeah, that was and then didn't they have did you go on that submarine ride where there was the cheesy foam tentacles on the outside, like you were being swallowed by an octopus or something? I think I heard Dad talking about that. And I went to Disney World in Florida.
Oh.
And I had the same thing happen on my ride. I kind of thought that was a neat ride. It was like a dome so you could see out, but then they pretend like you were being attacked by an octopus. What about other travels? I know you and Anthony did a lot of traveling together. It was one of the things that I was most jealous of. I wish I could travel as much as you guys used to, but I remember there was the one story about how you got kind of stuck in a snowstorm in Kansas, and you were in a garage with the fifth wheel, and there was a screen door that was all ice from the snow hitting it. And there was like a clothesline from the garage to the house so that you'd hang on to that so that you wouldn't get lost if you were in a blizzard.
Yeah, we woke up and all the electricity went off.
Oh, yeah.
And we just thought it was then we looked out, and there was a terrible amount of snow. We didn't know it snowed all night.
Yeah. Did you take cover then, or had you already taken cover in those?
No, we went in the house then and said, because, and just luckily, my aunt had the old type furnace, and with the floor, the metal things in the floor, and there was no electricity for the fan to blow the heat up, but the gas just kind of kept it a little bit warm, and it would just seep up, so the house didn't get too terrible cold. And we had water in our trailer, so we brought it in. So because the water tower was high, and they had to pump the water up into the tower, and the electricity went off. Somehow they didn't have any way to get the water up, so the town was out of water.
Oh. Yeah, I was going to say, was that a personal water tower, or that was the one for the whole town?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah. That was what town?
That was in Walsh.
Oh, okay.
That was my aunt's place. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I guess I thought that was in Kansas. And then you guys ran into Dad and his girlfriend down in Antonito, looking at the trains, and they saw each other there.
Yeah.
That was kind of a neat time there. Is there anything else you want to share that I didn't think of, or?
Let's see. Oh, I always had so much fun with your grandmother.
Yeah.
We used to go out places, and the boys were always into musical things with the school, so they'd go out different schools, and they sang. They were in the quartets, and they also played horns. And she would always invite me to go with her, and that was always so much fun. She was such a great person. I really enjoyed her.
Well, I'm sure she really appreciated you, having you to hang out with. It was all men in her life otherwise, except for maybe Carmela and Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you letting me do this. I guess we can't think of anything else right now, so I guess we're at about 26 minutes, so I guess that's pretty good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Talk that long.
Yeah. Well, lasagna's not done yet. I thought we'd talk till lasagna was done, but I guess if we're out of stuff, then we're out of stuff. So thanks, Betty. I sure appreciate this.
Well, I appreciate you doing it.
Well, I wish I was a little more smooth and polished at it, but I guess it'll be better than nothing. It's good.
Oh, that's great.
Great. Thank you, Betty.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.